Today's sermon is titled Dementia, Not a Normal Part of Aging, to be delivered by Laura DeLoye. Laura is the Program and Education Manager for the Alzheimer's Association of San Luis Obispo County. Laura coordinates groups, support groups, education, volunteers, information, and referrals, as well as care consultations. Laura has worked at all levels of care with older adults and caregivers for over 25 years as a board-certified music therapist, community coordinator, adult daycare center director, and nonprofit organization director. She has presented about music therapy and dementia at local, state, regional, and national conferences. Born and raised in Ohio, she also lived in North Carolina and has spent the past 11 years on the California Central Coast here in San Luis Obispo County. Please welcome Laura.
Good morning. Great to be here. So all of the music that I got to choose today, I loved going through the your hymnal because there's cool songs and there's songs that really I just wanted to hear you all sing and play. But they're also coordinated in with the talk today too. So thank you, Mary and Randy, for inviting me here today and for being able to be with you here in Cambria as well as on Zoom land. So wonderful. I kind of doubt that you start your service many times with Rogers and Hammerstein. I don't, probably a first, maybe, I don't know. So the story behind, and I said I had stories for each of the songs that were chosen. But Oh, What a Beautiful Morning is one of those songs that every time I hear it, I think of a woman named Flo, who I knew in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, when I worked at a retirement community. And she used to play piano for the silent movies. And so as her dementia, she was in assisted living part, it was a continuing care retirement community. So you'd move in independent care, and then as your needs, if they needed progressed, you would go through to, you could move into assisted living and then the health center. And so I worked in the health center with folks with dementia, and we wanted to just still be able to utilize her skills and her talents and help her stay connected. So she would come over once a week. Sometimes she would forget which day she was supposed to come, so we do those reminders, but we worked with what was helpful, and her husband as well. And she would come over, and that would always be the start. She needed no music to play, which drives me nuts because that's how I play. But she would sit down and it would be flourishing. And so many times I could just imagine that she's like, there's a screen going on and I'm just going to accompany it. So she would start with Oh, What a Beautiful Morning, which is a great tune. Like, we all know it. We can hum parts of it, learn the different lyrics. And then we'd get on to another song, and then it would go back into Oh, What a Beautiful Morning again, and we'd be like, okay. But what we needed to do was, and her playing was always beautiful, but you could start to see some of the other residents were like, and so we would cue her, but work with her in that space. It wouldn't be the, hey, you know what, could you get on with something else, right? We weren't taking that kind of approach. So obviously, if you didn't realize, she had dementia, so she was in the early stages, but still very, very independent, and it kind of comes and goes. And then she would tell stories and things like that. So that was all the sounds of the earth are like music, and it was just being able to bring her into that space and still have that useful, the need. Like, we all wake up with needing to have a purpose in our life, so that was part of that. But that really, I just, the point of meeting a person where they are, it's great if we do that all through our lives, but particularly within dementia, it's an important aspect, because we're the ones who are able to change and adapt a person with dementia, the disease process that's happening. They're not able to do that as well. So I'm going to start off with, I do have a few slides. So dementia, if you don't know, just to get everybody on the kind of same page, it's an umbrella term, and it's different symptoms that it's more than just forgetting somebody's name. right? It's more than, oh, I missed that appointment. So we'll go into some of those warning signs today too. So it's the decline in cognition and in language, problem solving, those kinds of things, attention span. And then, so I work with the Alzheimer's Association, and it's a little bit of a misnomer. Dementia, it could be somebody who has Lewy body dementia or vascular dementia, frontal temporal dementia. In the Alzheimer's Association, we help anyone who's in that space. We primarily work with caregivers to help support, educate about those processes, help to problem solve with them things that are going on. So within dementia, we go through, if you could, next slide. We're going on to that. Yeah, there we go. So Alzheimer's disease is, we use that interchangeably, again, because dementia is that umbrella. But particularly within Alzheimer's, it's the most prevalent disease that has the symptoms of dementia. So that's why we oftentimes will just note Alzheimer's disease. Our risk factors, people many times, well, how can I not get it? Right? It's not contagious. It will tell you that's a myth. It's not contagious. It is a disease as we age. So that is our number one risk factor. So we all are at risk of that. Gratefully, we're still aging. But then also family history, it does increase our risk. It does not mean that you're going to get it. My dad had dementia. I had a grandfather who had dementia. Those increase my risk, but it doesn't mean that I will get it. There are there's a younger onset dementia, which is prior to age 65, if you're diagnosed with that. That does have a more hereditary component to it, a more genetic factor to that. And you can go through genetic testing and things like that, but certainly do that with a genetic counselor, because there's a lot of stuff that can affect us in that realm. Lifestyle factors, a big part of, how do we work to prevent dementia? A lot of times we talk about our diet is important, right? So what's good for the heart is good for the brain. They work in conjunction to make the whole body function. And so that type of the Mediterranean diets, right? The good oils, the heart healthy types of diets are really good. Smoking, not so great. Decreases the capacity for both our heart function and our brain functions. Exercise, social interactions. It's been a very difficult time over COVID. We know that for many reasons, but we have seen an increase in the symptoms of dementia for folks who had already been showing signs and symptoms of dementia or Alzheimer's disease. Those have increased, as well as just it's a vulnerable population. So the death rate, unfortunately, has been higher too. But Alzheimer's and dementia, it's not a normal part of aging. So it is a disease, just like, cancers and cardiac heart failure, all of those type diabetes, they're all different diseases. So dementia is a disease of the brain. And many times we think, oh, she's just stubborn, or he's just always been forgetful. And yes, that is true. But it is not only, there's that difference between mental health and dementia, and trying to say, okay, where do they intertwine? There can be symptoms certainly of within dementia. Depression is not uncommon, so those can go hand in hand. Just kind of working through some of those types of things. Let's see what else. Some other risk factors too. People of color, unfortunately, are at a higher risk for developing Alzheimer's disease. Those who are African American are 2 times as likely, and those who are Latino descent are 1.5 times likely. We're not certain why that is exactly. A lot of it has to do with health disparities and access to care, for sure, but also continuing to look into that and research-wise. So the Alzheimer's Association is a national nonprofit organization with different chapters throughout the county or country. So I'm the programs and education person for San Luis Obispo County, but I'm part of the California Central Coast chapter, which includes SLO, Santa Barbara, and Ventura counties. So there are a couple of other chapters throughout the state. So if you have a loved one in another state and you're like, I'm kind of concerned about my uncle, and is there somebody that we can help them turn to locally? Yes, there is. So certainly feel free to contact me. Also want to take the time. I do have some flyers at the entrance over there, and we can get information to y'all on Zoom as well. But I'm here. I'm available. Let me know if there's ever any questions that you have in that realm. And I think we can take some time after the service today too. But I want to go. So if we go to the next slide, go through our 10 warning signs. And these are too small a print in here, I guess. And again, like, you can find these online at alz.org is our national website. But these are 10 warning signs. There's some great brochures back there as well, that talk about, what's the difference? Like, is this dementia or is it just normal aging? Because as we age, we have a larger Rolodex of information that's in our head, right? And so it takes sometimes a little bit of time to figure out, what was that memory whenever I was 30 and we did some, right? So there is some of that. But really, these 10 warning signs, it's all about, is it really disrupt? Like, is there something that's disrupting your general daily life, right? So memory that disrupts daily life. If you forget somebody's name when you see them in the grocery store because you were trying to remember your list of 5 things that you wanted to get so that you could go home and make dinner for your friends who were coming over that night and you were going to go on a trip the next day, there's a lot that you're trying to process, right? So seeing somebody in the grocery aisle and being like, oh my gosh, I totally forget their name. Oh my gosh, is it dementia? Probably not. Right now, if you forget names of, continually, of those who are close to you, just those kinds of thoughts. So it is, but not unusual to forget names. When you, I will say too, within those risk factors and dementia, we just had the 2022 facts and figures came out for the Alzheimer's Association, and we are in older adults. And this is, as dementia increase, or as we age, our risk for dementia increases, basically 1% every year past 65. So every 5 years, a little bit higher increase for possibility of dementia. So really, by the time we're 90 years old, 1 in 3 will have dementia. It doesn't mean that we're all in the late stages at that point in time, right? And so that's been part of the trajectory, is trying to offset any symptoms to later in life. So and we are living longer, but it's, if we can make it to 90 and we're just starting to have some memory loss or some attention issues or problem solving difficulties, then if we have 10 years of that is different than if we have 30 years of that. So that's part of that, the process of our association's research and things along that lines. Challenges in problem solving, or planning or problem solving. we all make different occasional errors, whether that's managing finances or it's like, oh my gosh, it's already almost the 30th. I forgot to pay that on the 20th when it was due, right? Those things happen. Gratefully, we do have those reminders that we can have automatic payments happen online now and those types of things. But when you may go into a relative's home and there's a lot of disarray and it's like, oh my gosh, there are things that should have been happening in January and they had no recollection of that. There's some cause for concern. And again, these are 10 warning signs. It's not diagnosing. So just always want to be clear on that. Difficulty completing familiar tasks. Somebody is making their famous cake that they bring to all of the potluck functions. And, sometimes we can misplace something, leave out an ingredient, but whenever it's like, oh, wow, I put in a cup of baking soda instead of a cup of sugar, those kinds of things. Or when it's like really different, those are oftentimes whenever you're noticing in the changes of baking or driving. This is where driving in dementia is an issue because there's a lot, as you see, like not only the completing a familiar task and going from point A to point B, but then also confusion with time or place. Driving is not always, there's a reaction time whenever, as well as, oh yeah, I should turn left into here. No, that's a one-way street. You should not do that. Right. So those can be things like that. Also, trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. Like if you think about this disease that's happening in the brain, it's plaques and tangles that are changing those neural pathways and those connections. And so it's also affecting our vision and our proprioceptive space. Like where are we in time and space? Like if I look at this and I don't, I could misstep for sure, but if I had dementia and I'm looking at something, there's a light strip here, I might not want to step on that because it's very visual. It's very good for me right now because I can see there's a difference. But with somebody with dementia, that could be a visual change. And you might not want to, you might think that, oh, that's a hole or a crevice. And so you might do a big, huge step down. And it's like, no, actually, you didn't need to do that. But those visual things change. So if you think about that within driving, our reaction time at a stop sign, very different. So it's more than just getting lost, right? So that's considering things to think about. Or I know I spoke with a caregiver the other day and she's like, yeah, we wanted to drive from Orange County to San Luis Obispo. And I was like, but if my uncle is along, we need to drive 50 miles an hour because he can't deal with that going fast kind of thing, that feeling. New words, language, speaking, writing difficulties. If somebody is reading one page of a book and they turn it and they're like, wow, I have no idea what I read on that first page. We can all do that again, depending on how many balls we're juggling in the air at a time. But if that's a continual thing, making up different words for commonplace things. Again, we all misplace things, but they're the classic, if your keys are in the freezer and you had no idea, you couldn't retrace that step, just things to concern about. Again, the poor judgment, particularly in driving, if you think about how much we need to make quick judgments, those are concerns. Withdrawal from work or social activities, that's a big one. And it's like, oh, well, my husband didn't want, he just doesn't want to go out anymore. Like, I don't know if it's just because we've been in COVID and now we're used to not being around people, but there can be that withdrawal because if you're having difficulty with all of those other things, right? All of the other things on that list, as well as, just that uneasiness, everything has the possibility to be confusing. And if you're forgetting names, if you're not able to track a conversation, yeah, I don't want to go out and be made a fool of, right? I don't want to look strange, or I want to keep up with things. So that can be a withdrawal, and there's always reasons behind it. That's a just kind of recognizing these types of warning signs. So next slide. And this I just think is a big, because you all are together, you know each other. You know, our family and our friends are often the first ones to notice those changes. Going back to the reading of "When I am old, I shall wear purple." You know, some of us are just quirky and we wear purple. Purple happens to be the color of the Alzheimer's Association, but you know, for those of us who, yeah, you know, I'm getting older, and so I want to be me. You know, we work out of those constructs that we grew up in, but still knowing the dignity of each other. And if something is a little bit awry, we get to, you know, it's not so much of like, oh my God, what's going on with them? You all work with the dignity of each other. Like that is what brings you together in this space. So it's a good, you know, community to be able to say, okay, I wonder what's happening. Can I help out? How do I do that? So next slide. So yeah, this is small print, my apologies. So really this is like, okay, if I notice some 10 signs, some of those, like, what do I do? Certainly have a conversation, you know, kind of assess it, maybe talk with, you know, if it's in a family, maybe talk with, if, you know, if you have children, hey, have you been noticing anything different in mom? What's going on? And just being able to be open about it. That's a big part of what I do as far as education, and what our volunteers do is helping to decrease a stigma, because it's like, oh, they're just getting old, they're getting crazy. You know, and that's not the only thing, you know. And again, like I always go back to, you know, my former client Flo, who it's like helping to find a purpose and helping to find, are there other things that are going on? You know, because it's not always dementia, just because we're having forgetfulness. I mean, there could be an infection that's happening. There could be low B12 levels. There could be dehydration. Those all really throw things off. It could be something else that's happening with one of our body systems, right? So really thinking about that, what else is going on? And again, like, we're still coming out of a pandemic. There's been a lot of change, a lot of, you know, whether people have moved or people have died or people have, you know, changed your life. Those are big issues. So then certainly being able to have a conversation, really highly recommend do not argue. There's an acronym, DARE. So whenever you're working with a person with dementia or talking with them, do not argue, reason, or explain. Those aren't going to get you anywhere, right? Because of all of those 10 warning signs, all of that cognition that's just starting to be differently functioning. So have a conversation when it's an easy time, not when it's like, oh my God, you're driving me nuts again, and let's talk about this, right? Not the time to have a conversation. I think overall, never a time to have a conversation, but particularly within dementia, because there's that increase. And if you're seeing an increase in anxiety, it's like, okay, let's, you know, kind of downplay it, move on, come back to it at another time. And I'll get back into music because there was a situation that was shared this morning that, you know, being able to utilize music, that is a great time. It does open up our emotional space. It helps to connect with our memories of the past. It provides a calm or an energetic space, depending on what music you use. But being able to, you know, listen to a music or sing something together, or, you know, if a person is a dancer, dance and move. But those are great ways to engage, help kind of create a nice little bubble of a space, and then have a conversation, and reach out for support. So certainly, you know, turning to the Alzheimer's Association, whether that's me, a volunteer, or another chapter, just please do that. We've got an amazing amount of resources, and just I've been working for the association about 2.5 years, and that's something that I have always turned to with the Alzheimer's Association over the work that I've done. But it's so great because it's available, and then see a doctor, checking in, like I said, with those vitamin levels, with the dehydration, with any other infections that might be going on. Next slide. So this is just a slide of my information. And again, we can certainly get this to folks on Zoom, but it's also recorded. My office is in San Luis Obispo. We do have here in Cambria, we've got a couple of support groups that are happening at the Cambria Galleria. The first and third Mondays from 3:30 to 5, there's a caregiver support group. And so we have those going throughout the county. We are back in person, yay, because that was something that happened. We didn't switch to not offering any programs, but we did move everything online. So we do have some support groups that will remain virtual. We've got some that are in person. Our local website is the CA Central Coast after ALZ.org. Yeah, and let's see, I think I covered everything. I just want to like double check my little. So yes, that is, I guess just to encourage folks to, be supportive, knowing that we don't have a cure currently. We have medications that can help to offset symptoms at this point, and working together. And I appreciate just being able to present to you all and knowing that 1 in 3 later on in life, that's tough to look at it just in this room as well as on Zoom. But we're here to support each other, and there are ways to communicate and how do we interact and learning those types of things. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.